When brute force crosses paths with quiet strength, something has to give. And that evening, in a quiet corner of Brookside, Illinois, 5 bikers were about to learn a lesson they wouldn't forget. The sky was painted with soft gold as Saturday wound down. Families lounged on picnic blankets. Little kids chased soccer balls, and teenagers tapped away on their phones, earbuds tucked in and eyes half alert. Elijah, 16, sat alone beneath a towering oak, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. His younger brother, Caleb, was just wrapping up soccer practice nearby, and Elijah had promised their mom he'd walk him home. Dressed sharper than most kids his age, Elijah looked like someone who belonged on a debate stage, not a playground bench. He quietly flipped through a book, focused, unbothered. Then came the low thunder, motorcycles growling in the distance. Normally, it meant nothing, just bikers cruising by. Loud engines, big egos, and a need to be noticed. But this time, the rumble didn't fade. It grew louder, closer, until the bikes turned in and lined up near the soccer field, tires crunching the gravel. 5 men stepped off, leather jackets, dark jeans, boots that made every step feel like a threat. They didn't laugh, they didn't talk, they scanned. And when their eyes landed on Elijah, they stopped. He felt it instantly, that shift in the air. He glanced up, catching their stare, 5 against 1. The look in their eyes wasn't casual. It was sizing up, measuring. He didn't flinch, just calmly turned back to his page. But inside, his gut twisted. The bikers didn't stay put. The biggest of them, bald and broad like a bulldozer, bumped his friend's arm and started striding toward him. The others followed. Elijah heard them before he saw them. Gravel cracking under thick boots, their presence growing heavier with every step. His fingers marked his page, closed the book slowly, and waited. What came next wasn't going to be casual. As they drew closer, Elijah's heartbeat pounded against his ribcage, but his face stayed neutral. His mom's words echoed in his mind, never given the satisfaction. He let her voice ground him as he calmly folded the page in his book and set it aside. The big man came to a stop just feet away, his boots crunching against the gravel. "What are you doing out here, kid?" he asked, voice gravelly and deliberate. Elijah lifted his eyes, brows slightly furrowed. "Waiting for my brother," he said evenly. His tone was polite but firm, measured, like a line drawn in sand. The man glanced at his crew and smirked. "Doesn't really look like your kind of place," he muttered, lacing each word with quiet implication. Elijah's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't flinch. "It's a public park," he answered, locking eyes with the biker. No fear, no retreat. The smirk dropped from the man's face. "Got a smart mouth, huh?" he said as he stepped closer. The other 2 bikers widened their stance, casually forming a semicircle around him. Families were still scattered across the park, parents chatting, kids laughing, but no one seemed to notice the tension blooming beneath the oak tree. Elijah's eyes scanned the area, looking for a witness, a break in the moment, but it was clear they'd chosen their timing well. Most of the park's attention was locked on the soccer field, where Caleb's game was winding down. Elijah's thoughts raced. He wasn't afraid yet, but he could feel the shift. The bikers hadn't come to talk. And while he'd spent years learning how to defend himself, he'd also learned when to hold back. Karate wasn't about picking fights. It was about ending them, only when necessary. He kept his voice steady. "Look," he said, "I don't want any trouble. I'm just here for my brother." The man didn't move. Instead, he leaned in, too close. Elijah could smell motor oil, leather, and something sour in his breath. "Trouble?" the biker said with a sneer. "Who said anything about trouble?" Elijah felt the pressure rising, like heat under a closed lid. Their stares weren't just casual glances anymore. They were loaded, testing him, daring him. His hands remained relaxed on his knees, fingers loose, but his body was quietly prepared. If it came to a fight, he wouldn't be caught off guard. Then the biker leaned in with a smug curl to his lip, voice thick with mockery. "Maybe you should show us what you're really made of," he said. Behind him, the others chuckled, low, cruel amusement under their breath. But Elijah didn't bite. He didn't blink. His hands never twitched. His body was still centered, but his eyes, sharp and unwavering, never left the man's face. All those years in the dojo had sharpened more than reflexes. They'd sharpened instinct. He watched how the biker shifted his weight, how his breathing changed, how his knuckles tensed and relaxed. These men hadn't come for a chat. This was intimidation, wrapped in a challenge. The leader leaned even closer now, his frame casting a dark shadow over Elijah's shoulders. "What's wrong?" he sneered. "You scared or something?" Elijah breathed out through his nose, calm and deliberate. He didn't respond, not with words. Fear wasn't the issue, not even close. His mind was focused on something else entirely. Time. How long until Caleb finished practice? How long until a parent, a coach, anyone, looked over and saw what was brewing? Then suddenly, cutting through the thick tension like a blade, a voice rang out behind them. "Leave him alone." Elijah turned slightly, just enough to catch sight of a small figure in the distance. A boy, no more than 10, stood frozen a few yards away. It was Caleb. His little brother had wandered off the soccer field, still glistening with sweat, cheeks flushed from the game. "Caleb, don't move," Elijah said, voice firm, slicing through the noise. But the bikers had already turned, eyes narrowing with interest. Their smirks widened like wolves spotting something easier to corner. "That your little bro?" One of them sneered, pointing a thick-gloved hand toward Caleb. "Maybe you both need a little lesson." Elijah felt a spike in his chest. Not fear, but something colder, clearer. Resolve. He rose, slow and intentional, every muscle under control. His eyes never left them. He shifted slightly, grounding himself in a stance that had been carved into his bones through years of discipline, balance, focused, ready. "Don't go near him," Elijah said quietly. The softness of his tone made the words hit harder, like ice over fire. The big man let out a short laugh and shook his head. "Check this guy out. Thinks he's some kind of ninja," he snorted. The others followed suit, their laughter bouncing off the park like a taunt. But Elijah didn't move. His face stayed blank, his frame locked. There was no bluff in him, and that silence, it started to rattle them. "You're not going to do a damn thing," one of the bikers muttered, stepping in closer. That's when Elijah finally broke his silence. His voice was quiet, steady and edged with something cold. "You really don't want to do this." The laughter died abruptly. Confused glances passed between the bikers, not expecting confidence. Certainly not from a teenager standing alone. But disbelief was a short-lived thing. The bulky one took another step forward and raised his arm, ready to shove Elijah aside. That's when everything changed. It happened in a blur. Too fast. Too clean. The man lunged. But before he could make contact, Elijah shifted his weight, slipping just out of reach with a movement honed by years of repetition, like muscle memory coming to life. The biker lost his balance for a half step, caught between aggression and surprise. Elijah didn't pause. He closed the distance, palm open, and struck the man's wrist in a sharp upward twist. A grimace of pain crossed the man's face as his arm recoiled and dropped. He stepped back, eyes wide, face twisting into rage. "What the?" he growled, but Elijah cut him before he could finish. "I told you to walk away," he said, voice calm, voice clear, unmoved. The other two didn't wait. They charged together, ignoring the warning. The first threw a sloppy punch, wide and fast, but it met air. Elijah dropped beneath it, fluid and composed, then countered with a precise kick to the knee. The man folded, groaning as he hit the ground. The second biker hesitated, a flicker of doubt, a breath too long. That's all Elijah needed. He pivoted hard, swinging with a spinning kick that struck clean into the man's ribs. The impact echoed. The biker stumbled back, wheezing, both arms clutched around his side, pain written across his face like a confession. By now, the bulky leader had caught his breath, his face flushed with fury. He charged at Elijah, fists flying like wild hammers. But Elijah didn't match chaos with chaos. He moved with the quiet precision of someone trained not just to fight, but to read intention. He sidestepped the blows, gliding with a calm grace honed by years of discipline. The commotion caught attention. People along the park's edge began to stop and watch. Parents, children, Even soccer players mid-game froze in place. A phone camera went up. Someone had started recording. The biker lunged again, this time grabbing for Elijah's lapel. But Elijah twisted, slipping free, then struck cleanly to the man's solar plexus. The biker stumbled backward, windless and stunned, his tough guy armor beginning to crumble under Elijah's steady composure. "Enough," Elijah said, loud and firm. His voice cut through the growing silence like a warning bell. "I don't want to hurt you. Leave now." His posture was solid, unmoving. His eyes weren't angry. They were clear, grounded. For a breath, it looked like the gang might actually back down. The leader doubled over slightly, wheezing and glaring, while his two backup men remained sprawled on the ground, one holding his knee, the other gripping his ribs. A charged silence lingered. "Let's move," the leader growled, waving them toward the bikes. They limped back, dragging bruised egos with every step, muttering threats under their breath. The engines growled to life, but before they left, the leader turned, pointing at Elijah with venom in his tone. "This ain't over, kid," he spat, then tore off with his crew into the night. Elijah didn't flinch. He stood tall, breath even, eyes steady, as the roaring bikes disappeared down the road. Around him, the park broke into murmurs and scattered applause. People whispered in awe, a few clapped. And then, Caleb. He came rushing forward, eyes wide with a mix of fear and wonder. "Elijah, are you okay?" he asked, voice shaking. Elijah crouched beside his brother, resting a steady hand on Caleb's shoulder. "I'm okay," he said quietly, offering a small, tired smile. "Come on, let's head home." But even as they walked away, the roar of motorcycles still faint in the distance. Elijah couldn't shake it. That moment, that warning, this wasn't over. Not yet. The two moved in silence, their footsteps echoing softly against the evening pavement. Caleb glanced up at Elijah now and then, eyes wide with questions he was still too young to shape. Finally, he broke the silence. "Elijah," he asked, voice hushed, like it might disappear on the wind. "How did you do that? I mean, they were huge, and there were 3 of them." Elijah gave a low chuckle, brushing a hand through his hair as he shook his head. "It's not about size, Caleb," he said. "It's about staying sharp, staying steady, knowing when to move and when not to." Caleb looked down, brows knit. "But what did they come back?" "That guy," he said it wasn't over. Elijah paused, turning to face his little brother under a streetlight's glow. "If they do," he said calmly, "we'll be ready, but you have to understand something." His tone shifted, gentle but firm, like a truth being passed down. Today wasn't about showing off. It wasn't about a fight. It was about drawing a line, standing up when it mattered, for you, for myself, and for every kid who's ever been told to sit down and stay quiet. Caleb nodded slowly, the weight of his brother's words settling into his young shoulders. Elijah reached out and gave him a firm squeeze. "Strength isn't in your fists, Caleb," he said. "It's in knowing who you are and never letting anyone make you feel smaller than that." When they finally reached home, their mother was already on the porch, arms folded tightly. A crease of worry etched deep into her brow. "You're late," she said, the tension in her voice impossible to miss. Elijah paused at the foot of the steps, casting a brief look toward Caleb, who stood beside him, unusually quiet. "Something happened at the park," Elijah said, carefully choosing his words. He didn't want to stir panic, but he wasn't going to cover the truth either. Honesty had always been their family's anchor. As he unfolded the story, bit by bit, her face changed. The fear that first tightened her jaw slowly softened into something deeper. Pride. She stayed silent throughout, lips drawn tight, eyes shimmering with emotion she didn't try to hide. And when he was done, she stepped closer, brushing his shoulder with a trembling hand. "Elijah," she whispered, her voice trembling but proud, "you did right by your brother and by yourself. But promise me one thing. Never take risks like that unless there's no other way." Elijah nodded, his voice steady. "I promise," he said, and he meant every word. That night, as Elijah lay staring at the ceiling, the day's events played on repeat in his mind. The intensity of those bikers, the stunned faces of the crowd, And that one line that lingered like an echo in his chest. This ain't over, kid. But there was no fear clinging to him now. Fear had long ago lost its grip. He'd learned that fear only controls you when you let it. What filled him now was something else. Quiet clarity. A sense that what happened wasn't just a random encounter. It was a moment that mattered, a moment that proved something real, that standing your ground with calm and purpose could ripple far beyond fists and fear. And somewhere in the stillness of his room, Elijah understood this wasn't just about knowing how to fight. It was about knowing when and why. Because facing down what's wrong, even when it's intimidating, is always worth it. Elijah's journey reminds us that real strength doesn't shout. It shows up when it counts. It's the kind of strength built from discipline, calm under pressure, and the courage to hold your ground when others expect you to fold. His story isn't just about defending himself. It's about rising above fear, staying composed, and standing firm in the face of disrespect. What he did out there wasn't loud, but it echoed with purpose. So ask yourself, when pressure hits, who are you? Will you shrink, or will you rise with quiet courage? If this story struck a chord, take a second to think about the battles you face, whether for yourself or someone you care about. Sometimes standing up is the boldest thing you can do. Fear might still be there, but bravery means doing it anyway. Like this video, if it moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. And hit subscribe to discover more true stories that remind us the calmest voice in the room often leaves the deepest mark.